So we're wrapping up a three-part series on my book, Sacred Thinking, and today is about practice. The third portion of the book is about how we use spiritual practice in order to really to align ourselves. It really is about the reason we need to do spiritual practice is because things don't stay the same. We're continually co-creating our experience with everyone and everything else. And it's sort of like if you imagine yourself as a boat, you don't just stay at the dock and float. You have to go out and leave the harbor and get out into the rougher waters where you need to be seaworthy. And being seaworthy is kind of the equivalent of being life-worthy as a human being able to encounter what shows up in life and being able to meet it from a place of mastery, really, to be in the place of your own genius revealed, your own strength and power revealed, so that you're able to maintain an even keel as you go through life and meet the various challenges that will occur. I would imagine everyone in here has had some challenges in life. Anyone has never had a challenge in life at all? Anyone? Okay. Okay. Andy. Okay. Today when our amazing video team came in, everything wasn't set up because we had a coffee house Friday night, and Skip, the head guy's not here today. So they got to find out how they felt about their own mastery of the video system. They hadn't planned ahead on needing to set everything up and to do. It's not just the cameras; it's the software and integrating the slides and things like that. If you watch our online presentation, you see it's fairly complex. And when we hit that kind of a place where things show up in an unexpected way, our preparation is what determines how we deal with that. You can't necessarily just call forth mastery if you haven't done the work in advance to be in a place of being able to master something. So practice is really about that. It's about creating an inner alignment, actually realizing an inner alignment that's already there, and strengthening and strengthening and strengthening that alignment so that as you go through your day and you go through your week and you go through your year, you are better equipped to encounter what's going to show up and to be creative in how you do that. And you're better equipped to be more of a creative force in your own life rather than a mere reactive force. So that's really the reason we do spiritual practice. We do it so that we'll be better when we get in the game. It's kind of like being in the on-deck circle in baseball. When you're in the on-deck circle, I've been watching the Little League World Series, which has been really wonderful. Those kids get in there and they're swinging 2 or 3 bats around in the on-deck circle. They swing a heavier weight so that when they get into the game, the bat feels lighter. So spiritual practice is really similar to that. It's preparation for getting into the game. Sometimes life appears not to work. Anybody ever had their life appear not to work? Yeah. How many today? Like, I'm sure in Napa, kind of people are going, this doesn't work, right? Yeah, we all have that. We encounter unexpected and expected times when it appears not to work. And often if we go into a place of feeling down, feeling defeated, feeling less than, because again, depending on how you walk into a situation, what do you bring with you when you walk into it? Have you done your work? Have you laid the groundwork? Have you built yourself up within so that when the inevitable challenge shows up, you're like, oh, fantastic. This is what I've been preparing for. To go back to the baseball analogy, if we put most of you out in front of a major league pitcher with a bat, it would be terrifying. The ball coming in at 95, 98 miles an hour and curving. You'd say, I'm not prepared for this. Well, you probably wouldn't go out and take that chance. You probably did, let me go to the stadium and go up and see if I can, bat against one of these guys. But if that's your chosen pathway, of course you're going to prepare. And you're going to want to get to the point where not only you're not terrified of getting up to bat, you're looking forward to it because you're going to get a hit. Now that takes a transformation of consciousness from what we might call an ordinary consciousness to a consciousness that has prepared itself for something specific. So what is your professional experience in life? You don't have to have a job to be a professional in something. A professional is someone who is well prepared and honed in for whatever it is they're doing. And that could be raising a family. Putting yourself, that can be psychologically challenging, right? That can call forth things out of you that maybe you didn't expect or didn't think you had. And there are some people that seem to do it so well because I would imagine that they've done inner work to prepare themselves psychologically for those challenges. Somebody just put on Facebook, that I know put on Facebook, "Oh my God, I've got a teenager in the house." The sweet little girl that she raised had turned into a teenager and grew fangs. And there was someone else that responded, "Oh, I've raised 3. You'll get through it." But see, it's that kind of recognition that what we're confronting, we're not the only ones that have ever done it. Other people have done it successfully. I knew a woman one time that was starting a business in her 60s, and she had been like a school teacher, so she'd never been an entrepreneur at all, and she decided to start a business. And we were in class, this is years ago when I was in Baltimore, and we're in class one night, and she's just saying, "Oh, this is so hard, I just don't think I can do it." I said, "What's the matter?" She goes, "Oh my God, I've got to get all these permits. I've got to get insurance. I've got to do a business plan. I've got to, deal with the bank. I don't know how anybody does a business." I said, "You're right. There aren't any, are there? Nobody's doing a business, right? There's only about 1 million of them in the area, and every one of them had to do all that stuff, you see. So it's how do we prepare ourselves to engage life? And that's really what spiritual practice is. So when life doesn't work, maybe it's your spiritual practice. Maybe you're not putting yourself in a position to be successful on an ongoing basis. And I'm just talking about doing the work to bring the best of yourself to whatever life you encounter. And then even going beyond that is bringing your creative energy to it to say, "You know what? I'm creating this. And I'm creating it from a conscious standpoint. I'm not waiting to see what happens to me. I'm generating my own experience." So we'll talk about prayer first. Prayer, we call it treatment, spiritual mind treatment. The prayer we do in this teaching is affirmative prayer, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Soren Kierkegaard said, "Prayer does not change God, but it changes the one who prays." Now, I used to think, when I was a little kid, learning how to pray, that I didn't have to do anything but pray. I would ask God for whatever it was I wanted and wait for Him to make it happen. He was kind of like, I saw God as kind of like a cosmic bellhop. It was get me this and get me that, but, you had to also feel unworthy at the same time. That was part of the deal. If I ask you from an unworthy enough position, maybe you'll grant me what I want. So I would, psychologically twist myself into all kinds of shapes to try to manipulate God into giving me a bicycle or a wagon or a day off from school, because those were the big things on my wish list at 7. And there are people who are adults that are still doing prayer that way. Let me just get down on my knees and ask God for something and then go about my business and not even think about it again and then wonder why it doesn't happen. See? Because we don't change God. If God is infinite, what's to change? In fact, you can't change an infinite. You can't add anything to it. You can't take anything away from it. The only thing that can change is my mind, is my degree of receptivity to good or to whatever it is I seek. So my prayer treatment is to expand my receptivity to whatever good it is I desire. And I do that by affirming what is already true. The steps of treatment. God is, I affirm the nature of spirit as I understand it, as I would like to. It's going to be an incomplete understanding because you can't understand an infinite. So just make it good stuff. You know, there's nothing to fear about God. God isn't angry at you. God doesn't have a personality. God doesn't punish you, per se. The only thing that punishes you is the natural consequence of your own consciousness. So I affirm the nature of spirit, the nature of God, as being infinite, as being purely present and purely available and purely affirmative. Because I want to create a consciousness as I do the prayer that God is on my side, that I live in a universe of unconditional love. And the second step we call unification. That's I am. That's where I affirm my own connection to that divine presence and my own worthiness to have or possess or to be whatever it is that I'm praying about. Because that's really what's stopping us from having or doing or being whatever it is we're seeking, is our own sense of self-worth. Do I really deserve to have all this good in my life? Did you ever get a lot of good all at once and you felt like kind of nervous? You know, like, oh, this can't last, you know? You know? Because we've convinced ourselves or become convinced that there's something wrong with us, that we don't deserve, and we know all the terrible, nasty, shameful things we've done. Somebody must be keeping score of that, right, somewhere. So you think of, you know, God with the big white beard sitting up in his office up in heaven, and he's got you on a spreadsheet. All of your grievous sins, all your grievous sins and your failures to be loving and your failures to be kind to people and your failures to just, you're a mess. And he's got a smite button on his keyboard. And he says, let's just give her a little shot, you know, and something terrible happens, right? That's not how it works, but that's sometimes if we think, the problem is if we think it works that way, we tend to draw in that experience. So the I am part, the unification part of the prayer treatment is, I am enough. I am worthy. I cannot lose 1 ounce of my worth by anything that I do or don't do. It's not conditional. My relationship to the divine, to source, is not conditional on anything I have ever done or will ever do. So, why is that part of the prayer treatment? Because I kind of need to remind myself of that on a regular basis. Because I tend to forget, don't you? I tend to fall into old patterns of thinking that, you know, when I was raised in such a way as not to think too well of yourself. Don't want you getting a big head. Well, I got one anyway. You know, I was taught you need to be kept in your place, whatever that was. And my place was usually beneath whoever was saying that. So that kind of thinking, while it may have been done with good intention, was not helpful. And it's not helpful to maintain it into adulthood. So this second step of prayer is about how I can come to accept myself on a growing basis as being adequate, being enough, being a magnificent expression of the divine presence, even when I don't feel like one. And the next step of treatment is realization. It's where I affirm what it is I desire, seeing it as though I already have it, and feeling as though I already have it. And that's like doing an affirmation. And the next step is gratitude, being grateful for what hasn't shown up yet. Being grateful in advance. And then release is turning it over to the law, not to some divine being in the sky that's going to take over the work. The law, you let the law operate. Pretty simple. That's called affirmative prayer or scientific prayer or prayer treatment. It's not an asking in the sense of asking anything outside of you to be different than it has been. So the chapter in the book, if you read that, I think it's chapter 11, you'll get that whole sense, and I really lay out all the steps. So what is sacred thinking? Sacred thinking is prayer plus. Sacred thinking, the idea behind the book, it's a type of thought discipline that holds the presence of spirit as a constant anchor within the process of thought. So what I want to do is have my prayer time in the morning, whenever or at whatever time of the day I do it, or times of the day. But what I want that to do is that attitude, that consciousness to bleed over into my everyday thinking. Because I figure, if you're good, you're doing maybe 15 minutes of active formal prayer a day, and the rest of the time you're kind of at the mercy of your mind, right? And you can undo a lot of good work over the course of about 16 hours of, oh, look at this idiot, So the idea is you begin to more and more think the same way as you are when you're praying when you're not praying. Which means what? Consciously trying to work to have an image that the divine is present here in me and in whoever and whatever is around me. Now, if we really did that successfully, there would be no more war. Think about it. If I know the divine is here within me now and it's within you, what's the fight about? Why would you be a threat to me or I be a threat to you? So now the evidence is it must be hard to do that. Because look around. Turn on the news. There's lots of war going on. Not just on the big battlefield, but in families, in relationships, in businesses. Why? Because during the day, we forget about the presence of the divine. So what can we do about that? Well, sacred thinking is an idea. Okay, remember, where am I? Where am I right now? As you go through your day, maybe, when you have a moment to think, okay, what's going on with me? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? Is it what I would choose? Am I in mastery or dominion over my process now, or have I fallen into an old pattern that's very limiting? Sacred thinking is a thought process designed to create positive receptivity, identification with spirit, and a clear degree of self-acceptance and constant gratitude. What if your day was filled with constant gratitude rather than intermittent resentment? You know what I'm talking about, right? You get to the DMV and get a number, and it's number 4, and you find out they're on number 822. 4, oh good, I got to go up to 1,000, then start over. Right into resentment. You resent those people with those earlier numbers that didn't sleep in, that didn't hit the snooze button a couple of times, right? And you resent the whole system. Thought this was supposed to be a free country. I got to come in here and get a license. Right? You go, don't you do that? I mean, you do stuff like that all the time, and you sit there and you don't even question it. You act like you're not being insane. We're hysterical. It's just amazing. What am I thinking about all day long? That's what I am. What I'm thinking about all day long. I'm really something greater than that, but in terms of my experience is limited by the quality and quantity of my thought. Sacred thinking is a thought process that leads to bliss. Well, if you're in a constant state of gratitude and unconditional love and expecting the good, what's not to be happy about? Well, what if it doesn't show up? But what if I'm grateful for whatever does show up? Joseph Campbell says the spiritual warrior says yes to everything, does not reject or resent anything, because everything that shows up is a product of the divine. Now that might be a little bit of a leap for some of us, because I'm sure you've got some stuff in your life that you haven't identified as divine. You've identified it as manure. Or worse. But what if that's there, whatever it is, because that was yours to do? I'd mentioned this before, but some years ago when South Florida got hit by a pretty bad hurricane, our center there, the Center for Spiritual Living Fort Lauderdale, sustained about $750,000 damage to their building and their grounds. And several of other centers were damaged. And on the minister's email listserv at the time, members submitted, why us? Why do we have to go through this? And then Dr. Arlene Bump from Fort Lauderdale says, if it happened to you, it's yours to do. It could not be anywhere else except by right of consciousness. Now that's a big step in self-acceptance, to step up and say, yeah, even the crap in my life is mine. And it's here to help me to transcend to another level of being so that I can transform the experience of whatever it is. You know, Einstein said a problem is never resolved at the level of consciousness from which it was created. So when I create a problem or co-create a problem, or one just seems to fall out of the sky and land on my lap, in order to resolve that problem so that it dissolves, I have to move to a higher level. What does that mean, move to a higher level? It means be more loving, be more wise, be more joyful, be more accepting, be more forgiving, be more grateful. That's what it means. Rather than get on the phone and complain to all your friends. At least the ones that'll listen to you. And they only listen to you because then you have to listen to them complain. It's called a codependent bargain. Be wary of your friends that let you complain to them. Little tip from Dr. Jim. Some of the other practices that we talk about in the book, and there are more than this. Meditation, we did a little version of that. Meditation is simply being present in the moment. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Forgiveness and acceptance is a spiritual practice, an ongoing. If you're in a relationship with anyone, you need to be in a continual state of forgiveness. Have you noticed? Or else you'll be in a continual state of resentment and condemnation. There's no other way to do it. You know, otherwise you'll be angry when the person doesn't make you happy. You're not making me happy right now, and I resent you for it. How stupid is that? Really? It really is. If my happiness is dependent on someone else on a continual basis, I'm basically screwed. Because who can control that? I can't control that. Can you? I can't control what other people will do. I can try to exert pressure on them, manipulate them, maybe intimidate them if I'm big enough and strong enough, so that they'll behave in a way that isn't authentic for them so that I'll feel better. But that doesn't really work either, because I know what's going on. I know it's all phony. Whew. This is heavy. Sacred service. Sacred service is giving of your time and your talent in order to serve some cause or ideal or something you believe in. The people on the sacred service teams here, there's an example of that. People that do the feeding the homeless that we engage in, or any kind of sacred service. Sacred service can also be the quality that you give at work. Wayne Dyer talks about, I hope you outperform your salary. You see, give more than you receive and have that as a spiritual practice. Because otherwise you start to resent your paltry paycheck, whatever it is. And you can resent a big paycheck thinking it's paltry. You see that happen with the sports athletes all the time, right? They only want to give me $10 million to play baseball. It's an insult. Well, insult me. So sacred service doesn't just mean volunteering, it also means the quality of service you give in any context. In any context. Tithing. Ooh. Now let me be really clear about what tithing is. And I know there are people here that tithe. Tithing is an exercise in giving a percentage of your income to a place where you are, or places where you are spiritually nourished. It's a coercive act. And the purpose of the coercive act of tithing is so you can learn to give freely. As soon as you're giving freely, you're not really tithing anymore. You might call it that. the idea is to give with no strings attached and no sense of loss. Otherwise, it's not really a gift. Do you ever have people give you a gift that's really ugly and you hide it, but when they come over to visit, you put it out in a prominent place? Stuff like that. Or do you ever give someone a gift and they didn't appreciate it enough, so you got resentful toward them? Well, I'm never giving them anything nice again. Well, you probably didn't give them anything nice the first time, but that's a matter of taste. But can I give a gift with no expectation? You know, it's nice to be appreciated, but if I need to be appreciated, then I've got a problem. And I've given my power to someone else. If you need your gifts to be appreciated before you can feel good about giving them, don't give them. Because somebody's not going to appreciate it up to your standard, and you'll just be upset. Well, you're off my Christmas card list. You know, stuff like that. We do little things to get back at people, right? And then you remember it for like 20 years. Wow. That's insane, right? Yeah. You know, I don't care what it was. I mean, if you're still got it brewing 20 years later, that's a present day issue. There are no old issues, by the way. Your subconscious doesn't know time. So if you've got a grudge from 1962, it's a present day issue if it's still irritating you. And it can only be resolved in the present day. So tithing is about learning to give financially. Learning, the first lesson that most people get when they try tithing is, hey, I can live on 90% of my money. That's a surprise for a lot of people because if I don't believe I can, I'm in limitation. See? And I can't give when I'm in limitation. I can only give when I feel abundance. So tithing is again, it's a coercive practice designed to help you learn to give freely. Spiritual self-development is kind of an overall idea of where maybe you have a little plan as to how you want, what are you going to do in the next year to support your spiritual growth? Have you thought about that? You know, if you're in a business, maybe you know you're going to go to these training seminars and maybe go to a conference and so forth to improve your professional skills. What about your spiritual skills? What about your spiritual self? Have you done any planning in that direction? Dorian and I have a coaching practice where we coach ministers. And the last session we do is developing a 1-year plan for their spiritual self-development. You say, well, ministers, they should know how to spiritually self-develop. No. Often no, because, you know, for many ministers, and I can speak to this to some extent applying to me, once you get up here, you figure you know everything. Who's going to teach me anything? You know, yeah, it's easy to get into that. It's hubris, you know, but it's easy to fall into it. So, you know, and you say, well, gee, I don't want to go to anything I'm not speaking at. Yeah, it's funny, but, you know. So the idea, you know, is there some kind of a retreat you're going to go to, or maybe, you know, coming here, taking a couple classes during the year, or whatever, getting a prayer partner, all these different things. What kind of books do you want to be reading, or videos do you want to be watching that will support your spiritual growth during the year? It's a good idea to kind of sit down and think about that. So meditation. When you meditate, you intentionally open to deeper aspects of your mind, inviting that deeper self to the surface by engaging in a sacred practice which, with time, quiets the seemingly incessant surface chatter of the conscious mind. In other words, the monkey mind, we call it, which is, you know, there's no space between the thoughts. I think that develops as a defense mechanism because we're culturally trained as we grow up not to entertain the deeper thoughts. In fact, in many cases, to be afraid of them, of what wants to arise from our subconscious mind. So the mind gets really busy. So meditation for most people for the first 6 months to a year is just getting a little minute gap every now and then between two thoughts. Because that true intuitive knowing needs some space to rise to the surface. And I said meditation doesn't have a purpose. If somebody said, I want to sit down and meditate on my financial situation. Okay. No, that's not meditation. That's contemplation, which is a good thing to do, but it's not meditation. Meditation is the practice of letting go, not directing your thought. And that's something we're kind of reticent to do in the West. We think our mind should be going all the time because we might miss something. Might miss a great idea. You know, you haven't missed any lately, but you might miss one, right? So meditation is the capacity to sit still and do nothing except observe your thoughts, not direct them, observe them. And you'll start to direct them, you'll drift away, and then you realize you're doing that and you gently bring yourself back. Let go again. Very powerful thing. It should be part of everybody's practice, and it's an ideal thing. This quote, we have a fear of effacing ourselves. That's the obstacle. Experiencing the innermost core of our existence is very embarrassing to a lot of people. A lot of people turn to something that they hope will liberate them without their having to face themselves. That is impossible. We can't do that. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to see our gut, our excrement, our most undesirable parts. We have to see them. That is the foundation of warriorship. Basically speaking, whatever is there, we have to face it, we have to look at it, study it, work with it, and practice meditation with it. See, a lot of folks want to come into a spiritual teaching that glides them across the clouds without ever touching the earth. Okay? And you can do that for like a weekend. You know, you get high on something, you go to a great workshop or something or a weekend retreat and you come out and you're high, and by Wednesday or Thursday of the next week, you've fallen through the clouds and crashed to earth, right? You're back in your own self. So for really ongoing, powerful spiritual work, we have to look at the unpleasant parts of ourselves, the shadow elements, the things we've repressed, the difficulties, the things that don't work. Simply affirming that everything's fine when at a subconscious level you know it isn't going to work. We have to also do that inner work, and meditation can be a big part of that, because when you meditate over time, and I'm talking months and years, meditation is not a quick return kind of thing. You start to make space, without even being aware of it, for these deeper things to arise. And a lot of stuff comes up in meditation that can be very unpleasant. That monkey mind chatter was keeping below the surface, but it's coming to the surface is essential for your healing. So that's part of the meditative practice. Forgiveness is another spiritual practice. Forgiveness and acceptance, they go hand in hand. Forgiveness, I call it the metaphysical F word, because a lot of people have trouble with it. Well, there are some things you just can't forgive. Well, and I know many people believe that. Because we look at forgiveness in a number of ways. In our teaching, we look at forgiveness as something that's strictly within the mind of the one doing the forgiveness. It has nothing to do with the other person or other people or whatever it is. And forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better yesterday. And it's also pulling the plug on the power you've given to those who harmed you in your own mind, where you just release them. Release them to their own pathway. It may include staying the hell away from them, if that's a smart thing to do. Right? You don't put yourself in danger by forgiving. But what you're doing is you're saying, I'm not going to carry this negative energy anymore. We carry this resentment, this anger at people that have harmed us, and we think that's hurting them. And hell, some of them are dead. They don't know what you're doing. And even if they do, even if you give them the cold shoulder or the silent treatment, you know, who's really harmed? We're also afraid that if we forgive, it'll let them off the hook somehow. that'll make their pathway easier. No, that's kind of coming from that old idea of a God in the sky that's got the spreadsheet on the computer. They have their own karmic debt to pay, and it has nothing to do with you. And if you refuse to forgive, you increase your own negative karmic debt. So they say, that's why they say in the East, resentment is like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die. So stop it. Gandhi said, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is an attribute of the strong. See, part of forgiveness is I'm perfectly adequate to run my life without having to worry about this other person or what they did. What they did not diminish me at all. That takes some inner strength. So that can be part of practice, is building up that inner strength. Sacred service, we talked about that briefly. Dr. Holmes said we should give of ourselves in love and in service to others in a spirit of generosity and good fellowship. To refuse to give is to refuse to receive, for everything moves in circles. Real giving is the givingness of the self. You know, I always say there's two ways to be in service in a community like this. One is to volunteer because you're needed, or because you want to be a greeter so you can meet people and find out who's single, or whatever it is. And there's nothing, or you want to get closer to the minister, or you want, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's just not a fulfillment of the highest possibility. Giving sacred service without concern about return, simply being in a place of giving, for one thing, it just feels good. See? And I'm not trying to manipulate the system, I'm trying to contribute to it. But for many people, there's a growth process for that. We call our teams here, we don't call them volunteers, we call them sacred service teams, because we want to encourage people to have the consciousness of being in sacred service. Because that's so critical. And it's so fulfilling. And it's so life-giving. And the whole community shifts when the people that are doing these service positions and jobs are coming from that position. It just has, the whole building feels different. I learned that from Mary Mann and Morrissey, who, when she used to run the Living Enrichment Center up in Oregon, people would, and I never went, but I knew a lot of people that went there, and I said, my God, you walk in the building, it just feels so different. He says, what was it? Well, the people like in volunteers, the greeters and all, they were like really happy to be what they were doing, and I found out it was a 6-month wait to get on a volunteer team. See, they had it going. And when you have that true sense of sacred service, people want to be part of it. It's an attractor. Not, oh, I got to serve because there's not enough people to make coffee. It's not an attractor. See? Whole different energy. So spiritual practice, again, is about cultivating that great energy to make you an attractor. There's a great saying from Christianity. I want to be so prayed up that when I walk down the street, people are healed just by walking past me. Because I would put that energy forth. Which you're putting your energy forth anyway. The question is it healing? Is it inert? Or is it destructive? You've been around people with destructive energy. You can feel it. So tithing, we've talked about this. Prosperity, change your thoughts, change your world. About anything. Tithing can be about, here's what you want. You want financial freedom. What does that mean? You're not worried about money. And that may mean you make $10,000 a year, or it may mean you make $1 million a year. It's, are your needs met the way you would live your life without constraint? Now, for many people that have been in limitation all their lives, Jim Carrey said a lot of people need to get really wealthy just to show that's not it, because they won't believe it otherwise. See? Because you look and you say, oh, you drive down Malibu and you look at those houses, and man, if I had that house, I'd really be happy. You ever been in that mindset, right? It's like me. I've told the story before. I used to think when I was in elementary school, 1st grade through 8th, 7th and 8th graders ruled the school. Man, when I get to be 7th grade, man, I'll really be happy. First day of 7th grade, I got on the bus. The 8th graders took my pants off and threw them out the window. Got to school with no pants on. So then I knew it was the 8th grade. When I got into the 8th grade, I thought if I can only get into high school, I got to get into this certain high school. I got into the certain high school, a prep school, and as a freshman, I found out what they do with you is they either tape you to a tree the first day or they stick you in a locker and lock the lock. So, okay, if I only get to be a sophomore. So I got to be a sophomore and found out that that wasn't it either. So if I only graduate and get a degree, my high school diploma, and I graduated, I thought, God, if I only go to college. And the University of Maryland had to take me because I'm barely scooted by with the minimum GPA that at that time was required. And then I thought, boy, if I can only finish college. When I finished college, if I only get a job. My first job as a cop, but boy, if I can only get promoted. Got promoted. Then I used to think, boy, if I could only make $20,000 a year. This was back in the 70s. If I can only make $20,000 a year, I'd really be happy. I got promoted from officer to captain. I skipped over sergeant and lieutenant. Whole bunch of pissed off people in those ranks. They made me deputy chief of the police department. I was 26 years old. I was the youngest deputy chief in the state of Maryland. And my salary was $19,995. But that was good enough for me. And I thought, that's great. And then I found out what it was like to be a captain. You think you're going to be in charge, but you got the police chief, and then now you got to deal with the mayor, right? I thought, well, gee, maybe I should be the mayor. You know, you just keep looking for the next thing because this isn't. You get it, and you go, this isn't it. Well, sometimes we got to get it to find out this isn't it. And guess what? It isn't it. Nothing is it that is going to make you happy and fulfilled. That's an inside job. And you can be a fulfilled person that cleans the floors, or you can be a fulfilled person that's the CEO of the biggest company in the world, or you can be unfulfilled in those positions. And we all know that, but we forget. Spiritual growth and renewal. What is my plan to increase my spiritual awareness? Am I doing daily practice? Am I doing things, going to workshops, hanging with people, working with prayer partners that help me to increase my spiritual awareness and my spiritual life? That's what it's about. Give yourself the gift of up-leveling your consciousness. Put that time in. We're doing the Mastering Science of Mind class now. I'm insisting that everyone do at least an hour a day of spiritual practice. After the first week, I had 3 people come up to me and say, holy crap, everything's changed. 1 week of an hour a day. For you. It's not for me. And someone says, I'm busy. You know, the old saying in the meditation world, you should meditate 20 minutes a day unless you're too busy, then you should meditate an hour. Yeah, because we got to break down these limited thoughts that hold us in place. As soon as you say, I can't do that, you're in limitation. Prove yourself that you can do it. So I hope you've enjoyed this series. And if you've missed any, you can watch the videos on our YouTube channel or pick up a recording in the bookstore. Thank you, and namaste.